Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. The Honourable Member for St. John's on a matter, or the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader on a matter of privilege.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. I rise on a matter of privilege. This is a serious matter, Madam Speaker, and I request an opportunity to properly lay out the facts of the matter as I understand them. This is the first opportunity I have had to rise on this matter, Madam Speaker, since learning the facts and reviewing the relevant authorities. The minister responsible for Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation and the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Authority of Manitoba made numerous public comments to media yesterday regarding a bill that has not yet been introduced in the House, Bill 42, Madam Speaker. The minister initiated these media briefings while knowing full well the legislation had yet to be introduced. The responsible minister indicated this bill will be similar in detail, scale, and scope as the previous legislation the PC government was forced to scrap, Bill 40. It is a long-standing tradition of the House that legislation should be put to the House first prior to any other person or venue. It offends the authority of this House to have legislation first proposed to individuals other than those who have been duly elected by the people of the province to consider, debate, and vote on such important matters. The most important authority, House of Commons Procedure and Practice, second edition, on page 85, is clear, Madam Speaker. It notes the provision of details of legislation to the media prior to members of the legislature is a breach of privilege. They write, and I quote, for example, in 2001, the question of privilege was raised regarding briefing of the Department of Justice held for members of the media on a bill that was yet introduced in the House while denying members access to the same information. Speaker Milliken ruled that the provision of information concerning legislation to the media without effective measures to secure the rights of the House constituted a prima facie case of contempt. End quote, Madam Speaker. Members of this chamber who are elected to represent the people of this province have a mandated role to fulfill their parliamentary functions. As such, legislation should be presented to this House first, as this chamber is where it will be debated and voted on. Even the Deputy Premier agrees. On May 9th, 2018, he said in this chamber, and I quote, "The contents of legislation being shared with both the public and the media before the members of this Assembly have had a chance to review and receive shows a history of disrespecting your traditions and practices of this Assembly and the rights of MLAs receiving information first before we are asked to offer comment or debate. This has been a long-standing parliamentary tradition and one that is observed by this chamber and its members." End quote, Madam Speaker. Those are the Deputy Premier's own words. This is sadly not the first time this government has violated the privileges of members by speaking about legislation before it has been introduced in the House. It is disappointing their flouting of our practices that they continue, Madam Speaker. As a result of these actions by the Minister responsible for Liquor and Lotteries Corporation, I move, seconded by the member for Concordia, that the introduction of Bill 42 be immediately stopped and treated as being out of order until such time as this matter can be ruled on by the Speaker. Miigwech.
Before recognizing any other members to speak, I would remind the House that remarks at this time by honourable members are limited to strictly relevant comments about whether the alleged matter of privilege has been raised at the earliest opportunity and whether a prima facie case has been established. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is something new. Generally, the government, or the opposition, I should say, waits until bills are introduced before they try to filibuster the bill. Now they're trying to filibuster the bill even being introduced, Madam Speaker. It's a new tactic from the opposition. What isn't new, however, is this sort of an allegation from the opposition. They will know, and you will remember, Madam Speaker, and others will remember, that is often the case that government speaks in generalities about legislation before it's introduced. I can recall the NDP, for example, speaking about bills that they were going to be bringing forward. Sometimes they would signal them in the throne speech, and they would say in the throne speech that during this session, during the coming year, the government will introduce legislation that'll do a variety of different things. That's not uncommon. Madam Speaker, I recall the former Minister of Justice speaking about bringing in legislation, for example, to fortify vehicles or against fortified vehicles as an anti-gang measure, and speaking about that before the details of the legislation actually came forward. It would not be unusual, of course, because government has to consult with stakeholders, for example, on legislation. Often the criticism that comes forward from the opposition is, well, why didn't you consult with individuals before bringing forward the legislation? Then you bring forward the legislation, they say, why did you consult with people? Why didn't you tell us first, Madam Speaker? So of course, when it comes to general terms of legislation, there's going to be indications in the media, whether that's through a throne speech, whether that's through discussions because they see it on the notice paper, whether that's through discussions with the stakeholders involved. But I know for certain that the text of legislation has not been shared with stakeholders, Madam Speaker, and that'll be distributed if the government, or sorry, the opposition doesn't want to block it in the next few minutes when the minister is able to table the legislation. Rather than trying to put up a fight against legislation before they even see it, I would encourage them to look at the legislation, think about the legislation, talk to others about the legislation, and then if they want to fight, they can fight it, but it's a premature fight and it's certainly not a matter of privilege.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, when we're dealing with a matter like this, of the government sharing details of a bill in advance, that there's a line here which is important, that the government may mention a bill is coming, but to share details is inappropriate. And in this case, we support the efforts of the member for St. John's to bring this to light, to bring the discussion open, and we support the efforts of the member for St. John's to have the introduction of Bill 42 delayed until this matter is resolved. I think it is an important matter, and we know that the government House Leader, although he talks about the tactics of the opposition, is full of his own tactics, and we and we want to make sure that that he has not crossed the line this time. Thank you.
A matter of privilege is a serious concern. I'm going to take this matter under advisement to consult the authorities and will return to the House with a ruling. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Thank you. Final. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Justice, that Bill number 42, the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment and Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation Amendment Act be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Justice, that Bill number 42, the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment and Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation Amendment Act be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very pleased to introduce the bill which amends the Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation Act and Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Act in order to create convenience for consumers and remove red tape for locally owned Manitoba small businesses. Manitoba current retail liquor system unnecessarily restricts what type of liquor can be sold at the type of stores. What this means is that many Manitobans have to make multiple stops in order to purchase liquor products. Bill 42, Madam Speaker, eliminates the inconvenience by allowing 482 existing liquor license retailers the option to sell all liquor products sold by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. The amendment, Madam Speaker, will be particularly beneficial to rural Manitobans who currently need to drive extended distances to purchase different liquor products at different locations. The proposed legislation also enables Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries to adjust the rapidly changing retail landscape by creating the ability to conduct a pilot project on retail liquor. The pilot project could authorize up to 5 years under the conditions set by the provincial government after the mandatory public consultation period, Madam Speaker. This initiative is another step towards the government's priority to reduce red tape for Manitoba businesses and provide more convenience, Madam Speaker, to Manitoba residents. Yeah.
I would indicate that is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. Just on a point of order, we've just raised a matter of privilege, and typically, Madam Speaker, as you are well aware and have routinely cautioned us, we are not allowed to speak to the issues at hand that are before you in respect of your consideration of a matter of privilege. And so I'm raising that with the introduction of the minister's new bill, which is, again, the subject of the matter of privilege that I just raised.
Is the Honourable Government House Leader on the same point of order?
Well, I think it's a lot of tactics and no strategy over there, Madam Speaker. If the member opposite is suggesting that she is concerned that she's not able to raise questions now about this particular bill because it's under advisement, if that's her concern, then maybe she should have thought about that before she raised the matter of privilege.
Doesn't make any sense.
On the point of order raised. Order. On the point of order raised by the Honourable Member for St. John's, I should note for the House that there are several important aspects involved in this. First, although a matter of privilege has been raised, it has not yet been ruled prima facie by the Speaker, and nor has the House agreed to proceed with the remedy proposed in the motion that has been raised by the Honourable Member for St. John's. Second, I should note that remarks at first reading are not considered to be debate of the bill, but instead are explanatory comments to explain the purpose of the bill. Third, I have a concern about the potential use of parliamentary privilege to prevent a cabinet minister or a private member from introducing a bill. It could be unduly punitive for any member wishing to bring a bill forward if they are prevented from doing so until a ruling on the issue has been delivered by the Speaker. For this reason, I will allow the first reading to proceed, and I have, but I will not allow second reading to proceed until a ruling on the issue has been delivered to the House. Accordingly, there is no point of order. Routine proceedings. Moving on to committee reports, tabling of reports, ministerial statements. Oh, the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there will of the House to revert back to tabling of reports?
Agreed.
Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to table the revised estimates order.
And we thank the Minister for that tabling. Ministerial statements. The Honourable Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon. Mabuhay. I rise today to recognize and celebrate Philippine Heritage Month, which our province observes annually in the month of June. This upcoming June marks the 124th anniversary of Philippine independence and the 63rd anniversary of the community's initial establishment in Manitoba. From its humble beginnings, the community has grown to become one of the largest in Canada, with more than 83,000 people of Filipino origin now calling Manitoba home. Philippine Heritage Month provides all Manitobans with the opportunity to learn about the rich heritage, history, and ongoing contributions of the Filipino community. Manitobans of Filipino descent have played an historic role in making our province the place we know and love, with their knowledge, skills, and leadership contributing to our collective success. Madam Speaker, the roots of Manitoba's Filipino community are deep, with over 100 groups representing the diverse interests, activities, and events of the community. Whether it be the Philippine Heritage Council of Manitoba, the Manitoba Filipino Journal, the Filipino Express, or CKJS, I commend all the Filipino representing groups for their leadership in organizing over 40 years of heritage celebrations. Madam Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the members of the Manitoba Filipino community who have joined us here today in the gallery, whose names I will include in Hansard. Wherever you may find yourself in Manitoba, the contributions and accomplishments of the Filipino community are evident. In addition to the many doctors and nurses in our hospitals, 30% of our nurse aides, orderlies, and parent service workers are from the Filipino community. As political representatives, our province has elected the highest number of elected officials of Filipino descent at every level of government, with the election of the first Filipino-Canadian MLA in 1981, the first Filipino-Canadian MP in 1988, and the first female MLA of Filipino descent in 2007. Whether it be in healthcare, arts, business, or in this very chamber, the impact of Manitoba's Filipino community cannot be understated. Madam Speaker, like many of my colleagues, I have attended events of the community over the years and can attest to their welcoming and community spirit. I've been joined by many colleagues in this chamber to a number of events here in Manitoba. Some of these include the flag raising at the PCCM, the Philippine Independence Ball, Manitoba Filipino Street Festival, Folklorama, and many, many more events. In addition to Winnipeg, there's a growing Filipino community in areas around the province such as Brandon, Steinbach, Nipawa, and many other municipalities around the province. These activities are just a handful of the many Filipino celebrations around Manitoba. With a growing population throughout the province, I know that there will be even more opportunities to celebrate this amazing community in the coming years. As we transition into warmer weather this month, I encourage all Manitobans to engage in the multiple festivals, programs, and activities offered by the Filipino community organizations. On behalf of the people of the province of Manitoba, I extend my best wishes to the Filipino community in honor of Philippine Heritage Month. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Salamat po. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage.
I'd like to ask leave to include the names in Hansard.
Does the member have leave to include the names in Hansard? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Member for Burrows.
Salamat po, Madam Speaker. Mabuhay. Filipinos have been central to the fabric of Manitoba for decades. Filipinos have played important roles in our healthcare system, built up our infrastructure as engineers, helped support the garment industry in this province, and drafted legislation in this very chamber. Everyone in this legislature is united in celebrating Filipino Heritage Month and all the many ways in which Filipinos contribute to this province. There are a number of specific organizations and people who deserve special recognition today. Groups like Manitoba Filipino Business Council do great work to support businesses in the retail, manufacturing, and restaurant industries. Among others, ANAC Incorporated is an award-winning youth organization working to preserve and promote Filipino culture in Manitoba. There are also a number of religious Filipino churches and organizations like Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, Sacred Heart, Santo Nino, Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Piet, Our Lady of Penafrancia, Lord of Pardon, and Cynical Prayer Group that have done important work supporting the Filipino community and Manitoba more broadly over the years. But Filipinos have also faced economic hardship and racism in this province and were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 over the past few years. So today, in addition to recognizing Filipino Heritage Month, the Manitoba NDP and I reiterate our commitment to address the challenges and barriers still faced by Filipino community. We need to work together to reduce anti-Asian racism and eliminate systemic racism. So as we celebrate Filipino Heritage Month, let's commit to taking action on these important issues. Salamat po, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for leave to respond to the Minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. June 1st, which is sneaking up quickly, marks the beginning of Filipino Heritage Month, and we just had an amazing kickoff to the celebrations just about an hour ago today in the Rotunda with all of our Maganda guests who are up in the gallery here today. Madam Speaker, 4 years ago in 2018, the national government passed a resolution recognizing June as Filipino Heritage Month, and I believe this has caused a ripple effect. Since then, the member for Notre Dame had a private member's resolution about the quincentennial celebration of Christianity in the Philippines, and my colleague from Waverley had a bill proclaiming that provincially the month of June be recognized as Filipino Heritage Month. Madam Speaker, I must point out that both of these individuals are Sisler Spartans. Now, the reason these pieces of legislation are so important is because June has become a month of opportunity. Opportunity to promote culture and heritage, opportunity to celebrate the many contributions that our Filipino community has made to our diversity and our economy. And for myself personally, June is an opportunity to give back to the Filipino community because they have been such a blessing in my life. Madam Speaker, over the last few years, my father and I have co-hosted events in celebration of Filipino heritage, and this year we have a bit of a hybrid event going on, which I will be providing more details of within the next couple of days. But what I want to focus on is the Philippine Heritage Council of Manitoba. They have organized events beginning on June 4th all the way up until June 25th, ranging from a flag raising ceremony to multicultural events, to the Philippine Independence Ball, and a multicultural music and art show for healing and reconciliation, just to name a few. Madam Speaker, I'm very excited to be able to celebrate back in person, and I just want to say salamat po to the Minister for bringing forward this statement here today. Say welcome to all of our guests who have joined us here at the Legislature, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity.
Further ministerial statements, the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with this statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our Hydrologic Forecasting Center is monitoring a precipitation system that could affect south and central Manitoba this weekend. However, no significant precipitation is expected to occur over the next 2 days in these areas. With the exceptions of the Whiteshell area, all locations north and south of Winnipeg along the Red River are declining slowly, but we are expected to remain high until early June, Madam Speaker. Water levels in the most drains, creeks, and tributaries are also declining. The current water level at James Avenue in Winnipeg is approximately 18.6 feet. It is estimated that without the operation of the Red River floodway, the Portage Diversion, and the Shawmouth Dam, the water level at St. James Avenue would be approximately 27 feet. Madam Speaker, with the water levels 27 feet, the impact to the City of Winnipeg would have been severe, devastating to the private and provincial property, would be insurmountable. Winnipeg River in the Whiteshell area remains very high, and its tributaries are expected to rise to reflect these water levels. These historical water levels continue to impact many locations within the Whiteshell Provincial Park. In response, our provincial crews are taking proactive measures to be based on the hydrological forecast and adjusting operations as updates are received. The Department of Natural Resources and Northern Development has offered additional support by deploying personnel to assist with incidental management, security, and mitigation operations throughout the Whiteshell Provincial Park, Madam Speaker. 33 local authorities and 4 Northern Affair communities, 7 First Nation communities, and 1 provincial park remain under the state of local emergency. In southern and central portions of the province, some evacuees are beginning to return to their homes, such as in the RMs of Morris, Rashot, Reynolds, and Emerson Franklin, Madam Speaker. Our provincial staff are monitoring dikes and road closures 24/7, Madam Speaker, and when it's safe to do so, we will begin to reopening these locations, Madam Speaker. As part of the province continues to experience flooding, while others are seeing their water levels recede, I would like to encourage Manitobans to continue to support each other through this difficult time, Madam Speaker. I'm confident our provincial and municipal staff will do the same, and for that, I thank them very much, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Concordia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Manitobans in every region of this province are still reeling from the impacts of this year's flooding. Water levels continue to rise in the Winnipeg River, and farmers in the Pembina Valley are increasingly worried about how much they'll be able to seed this year. In particular, we note with concern the devastation on Peguis First Nation, where around 500 houses have been damaged and 200 more destroyed. Pictures shared publicly show piles of household items that have been replaced because of water damage. Particularly tragic is the loss of items of ceremonial and cultural significance, like buffalo robes and ribbon skirts. While some areas of the province are still at immediate risk of flooding, we urge the province to begin supporting the rebuilding efforts in those areas in which the flooding has receded. Support for and partnerships with towns, rural municipalities, and First Nations in their rebuilding efforts across the province will be key to our recovery. Community members like Robert Thomas have spent the last few weeks working around the clock sandbagging and running pumps in Peguis. They now have to clean up and rebuild, so we urge this government to continue to help them to do so. We reiterate our appeal for them to begin a substantial flood compensation program as soon as possible so that Robert and all others with loss or damage to their homes can return home as soon as possible. Once again, I want to thank all of those who are working around the clock to help with flood response, and to all those provincial employees, volunteers, and so many around this province. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I seek leave to respond to the minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the minister and everyone who's been working hard to gather and share information and to fight floods on the front lines. The CBC reporter noted that there's a record flood on the Winnipeg River, the 6th worst ever flood on the Red, the worst flood in decades on the Fisher, flash flooding in the Parkland, Dauphin Lakes, and flood in Lake Winnipeg is on the rise. After the deadly storms in Ottawa and Toronto, the federal environment minister recently said that we need to do more and to have better emergency communications to warn people of dangerous weather in emergency situations. One of the ways of doing this clearly is through emergency alerts on cell phones, though of course that requires people to have cell phones and to have a functioning cell phone network, which is absent throughout much of rural and northern Manitoba. So these are just some of the areas where we need to invest in order to make sure that Manitobans are safe and able to respond to emergencies. Just as for years infectious disease experts warned that a pandemic was inevitable, we couldn't predict exactly where or when it would happen. The same is true of extreme weather events due to climate change. More heat, more cold, more storms, more damage and disruption. And we've seen 25 years of warnings and attempts to act on climate change, that have faced continual pushbacks and delays. We need decisive action because this is just a sign of more to come. Of all the jurisdictions in the world, Manitoba is one of the best places to fight climate change and to benefit from it. And there are extraordinary success stories in Manitoba of restoration and recovery. We should be taking bold action to make Manitoba stronger and more resilient. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member statements. The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Madam Speaker, today I have the great pleasure of honoring Waverley constituent Charles Carlos. He has been a basketball coach at Arthur A. Leach School in the Pembina Trails School Division since the 2015-2016 school year. Charles is a true advocate for the sport of basketball, but also for his students, looking for every opportunity to get them on the court through requesting as many practices and tournaments permitted. Since 2015, he has coached 9 individual teams, and on 2 occasions he coached 2 school teams at the same time, not to mention his concurrent work with his Ignite Club program and other teams in the community. This year, the grade 9 boys basketball team went undefeated all year in league, tournament, and championship games. At the end of March, they received the Pembina Trails Athletic Association banner for grade 9 boys after defeating St. Paul's High School in the finals. The Arthur A. Leach boys took home the March Madness tournament banner, winning 60-53 in a highly competitive game. When the junior high provincials were canceled this year, Madam Speaker, Charles rallied the basketball coaches and community together and planned one in its place. He organized everything from referees to scorekeepers and floor sweepers. He wanted to give the athletes, not only on his team, but throughout the province, the amazing opportunity to play for a provincial title in front of a large crowd. Coach Charles and the boys put in numerous hours of practice and showed a high level of commitment and dedication. Charles is able to develop different skills of his athletes, provide individuals with constructive feedback while empowering them and pushing them to strive for higher levels of play. His passion for coaching has resulted in him being named the coach of the provincial team Manitoba U15 boys team. One of the greatest qualities that Charles has as a coach is that he does outside of the sport. He develops character and community mindset with his athletes that extend greatly beyond the basketball court. He is shaping our youth to be constructive and positive members of society. Madam Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in honoring the Arthur A. Leach Grade 9 Boys Basketball Championship team and Coach Charles Carlos for his dedication to his service in developing the lives of our kids at Arthur A. Leach through his hard work and dedication. Thank you, Coach Charles.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Max Dupree once said, and I quote, "Leaders don't inflict pain, they share pain," end quote. So let's review the Premier's leadership. Forgot to disclose $31 million, because who doesn't forget millions of dollars? Broke Election Manitoba rules, stood up in the House to vote against the abortion protest buffer zone to protect Manitobans accessing essential health care, supported her deputy premier after his sexist comments. In the midst of devastating waves of the pandemic, she didn't work one weekend and couldn't be bothered to meet with the federal minister, refuses to call a public inquiry into the death of Crystal Musso, refuses to call a public inquiry into the corruption scandal at City Hall, strategically schedules press conferences during question period and doesn't answer our questions, has failed at getting the surgical and diagnostic backlog under any significant control, told Manitobans that they were on their own, failed to commit to a living wage, and is so proud to be the last province in Manitoba with the lowest minimum wage. Let her MLA talk out a resolution to protect young athletes from sexual abuse from coaches, gave the same MLA $500,000, capitulated to white nationalists, made a point of doing one of her first radio interviews with Dave Wheeler, a man who's made transphobic comments, and insinuated that the pandemic was not as bad as people make it out to be, tolerated anti-vaxxers in her cabinet and continues to tolerate them in her caucus, refuses to make vaccinations mandatory in personal care homes during the 4th wave, and Madam Speaker, continues Brian Pallister's agenda. Madam Speaker, Manitobans must vote out each and every one of this caucus. Miigwech.
Honourable Minister of Order. 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 Just a reminder to members, we have a lot of guests in the gallery, including students. And I'm going to ask for your cooperation, please. You want to set a good example for them to show where leadership can take people and that democracy does and can work. The Honourable Minister of Health on a member statement.
Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize the contributions of Windsor Park residents Peter Sisrin and Paulette Cote. Peter and Paulette, or more fondly known as the Soup Fairies, have been an integral part of my constituency of Southdale by providing relief and assistance to vulnerable members of the community by partnering with multiple charities and nonprofit organizations. Just like fairies, you can say Peter and Paulette are truly magical. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and after the passing of a loved one, Peter and Paulette came up with the wonderful idea of providing soup to those affected by COVID as a gesture of solidarity, warming the hearts of those around them, one bowl of soup at a time. They raised over $9,000 and provided 1,750 people with delicious soups and much needed support. This year, in light of the recent war in Ukraine, Peter and Paulette felt the need to extend their charitable efforts globally. With 40 years of experience in egg writing, Peter, alongside other artists, created beautiful Ukrainian Easter egg artwork, also known as paisanki. This is a traditional folk art using wax, dyes, etching, and other techniques to decorate eggs. Peter and Paulette also collaborated with others in the community, accepting donations of various pieces of art and auctioning them off. In total, Madam Speaker, they raised $6,683 in support of Manitoba Operation Blue Skies, a project of the Canadian-Ukrainian Institute Prosvita that is supported by the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Manitoba Provincial Council. They help deliver relief to displaced Ukrainian individuals. The donations raised through the artwork will go directly to funding bus passes for new Ukraine arrivals, helping to ease the burden of travel.
The member's time has expired. Is there leave to allow the member to complete her statement? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Helping ease the burden of travel as they navigate through a new life in Canada. Please join me in honouring Peter Sisrin and Paulette Cote and recognizing their efforts to make life better for their community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Winnipeg Pride Week starts tomorrow with a flag raising at City Hall. This is an exciting time for 2S LGBTQ+ communities experiencing the first in-person Pride since 2019. Winnipeg Pride is also hosting Canada Pride's second National Human Rights Conference. 35 years ago, in the summer of 1987, 250 people gathered at this legislative building awaiting the results of the Poly NDP government's decision to include sexual orientation in the Manitoba Human Rights Code. The crowd was prepared to protest or celebrate depending on the outcome. Fortunately, the first Winnipeg Pride Parade took place that day as 250 people celebrated in the streets, although some participants wore paper bags over their heads at the first Pride Parade out of fear for their jobs or safety. We've come a long way since 1987, although not always moving fast enough to ensure human rights and equity for all. 10 years ago, the NDP government was one of the first provinces to include gender identity in the Manitoba Human Rights Code, and we continue to push for non-binary and gender-diverse Manitobans to be treated with respect and dignity in this legislature and across the province. None of these legislative changes would have happened without the incredibly hard work and courage of countless community advocates. We all have loved ones and community members to celebrate, so I want to wish a happy Pride Week to all MLAs, staff, pages, and guests in this chamber, and to all Manitobans. I will close by highlighting an event taking place in the Wolseley constituency. The evening of June 2nd, 5 West Broadway businesses on Sherbrooke will be hosting a Pride block party. I'll be there as Tall as Poppy, Good Neighbor Tap Room, Roughage Eatery, Chips Vintage, and Public General Store celebrate our 2S LGBTQ+ businesses and community. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the Legislature prepares to rise for the summer, I want to briefly recognize some important days and exciting events coming up. Firstly, graduations. I want to wish all of those who are farewelling and graduating a very happy celebration for the adventures to come. Secondly, when it comes to Manitoba's rich diversity, we have a lot going on. June 1st marks the beginning of Filipino Heritage Month, where we have many activities celebrating all the contributions of our Filipino community here in Manitoba. June 21st marks National Indigenous Peoples Day, and it's a day providing all of us the opportunity to reflect on reconciliation and to learn more about history and culture of Indigenous peoples. On June 27th is Canadian Multicultural Day, a day where we intentionally work towards furthering our values of diversity. And July 1st, Madam Speaker, is Canada Day. And I want to extend an open invitation for all to join us this year as we restart our annual event where there will be games, face painting, cultural performances, entertainment, pizza, and fireworks, and a special tribute to Ukraine. Canada Day is also a time where we need to reflect on Canada's true history and recommit to real action on reconciliation and support healing. We all must do our part and recognize that this day will bring up traumas for many across the country, and that is why we are ensuring that there will be Indigenous representation and storytelling to educate all of us in attendance. Then, of course, Madam Speaker, 2 weeks of Folklorama pavilions beginning on July 31st, and personally, I'm determined to get a camp trip in this summer as well. Madam Speaker, with a few seconds left, I want to thank everyone from our clerks to our Hansard to our pages, everyone who works inside of the Manitoba Legislature for all of your efforts this session going hybrid. And I want to wish all of my colleagues here in the House well over the summer break. I hope you have lots of joy-filled memories over the summer and remain safe. Thank you.
Prior to oral questions, we have a number of guests in the gallery, and I would like to introduce them to you. And just add that it is a pleasure to see so many guests that we do now have back in our Manitoba Legislative Gallery. So we welcome you all. We have seated in the public gallery from Rock Lake School 13 grades 7 to 9 students under the direction of Tim Rempel, and this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. I would also like to draw the attention of all honourable members to the public gallery, where we have with us today participants and leaders from the Peaceful Village program in Winnipeg, a program which provides supports to new Canadian students to help them thrive and succeed in school. They have also brought along participants and leaders from their sister program, Peaceful Village in Halifax. And this group are guests of the honourable member for St. James. Also in the public gallery, we have with us today Ms. Bablin Reyes from Vancouver, Washington, United States, who is the guest of the Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration. And also in the public gallery today from North Bay, Ontario, we have with us Lance and Alexandra Johnson, who are the brother and sister-in-law of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, along with their 4 daughters, Adora, Ari, Asta, and Ivy. Also in the public gallery, we have with us today grade 9 students from Murdoch McKay Collegiate under the direction of Ms. Dudick, who are the guests of the Honourable Member for Transcona. That may have been the group that had to leave. And on behalf of all honourable members, we welcome all of you to the Manitoba Legislature. Now to the part where we say goodbye to 2 of our pages. Prior to oral questions, we always do this as our pages are leaving. One of our pages Quirin Setefeld is serving his last day in the chamber today, and I wanted to share some of his comments with the House. If I had to briefly summarize my experience as a page into 3 simple words, I would simply say it was extremely eye-opening. This is because this enlightening experience of being able to directly take part in the legislative process in a way that many young people at my age are not given the privilege to do so allowed me to grow as a person. It also allowed me to gain valuable knowledge that without a doubt I will carry with me as I continue to move forward in my life, as well as in my studies, which I plan to continue at the Asper School of Business next year. I just want to conclude by saying that I am forever grateful for having had this opportunity to be a page, as the many lessons I have learned have made it an extremely memorable experience. And another one of our pages, Prabnor Singh, is serving his last day in the chamber today, and I wanted to share some of his personal comments with the House. Sat Sri Akal, everyone. Being a legislative page was once in a lifetime opportunity which brought with it many lifelong memories, lessons, and friends. I will definitely miss this place, its ambiance, and the small interactions I had with the MLAs, clerks, journals, and chamber branch members. I leave this legislature with an inspiration of making a difference in the province, whether that is through an elected position in this chamber, being a community worker, or doing small acts of kindness. Thank you, everyone, for making this experience an incredible one. I look forward to seeing you all again. And I would indicate that his parents are here, and I would like to introduce them to you, to Jinder Singh and Arvinder Kaur. And as you can see, this place does have a profound effect on our pages. So we thank them for their service and wish them the very best as they go forward. Now to the next part. Yeah. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, of course, you meant the best part when you said that, Madam Speaker. I do want to take a moment just to welcome all of our guests to the building here. This is the People's Building, and I hope that you know that you're always welcome here. So shout out to the participants with Peaceful Village. Shout out to the students who joined us from Rock Lake, those from Murdoch McKay who had to depart to catch their bus, and also a big shout out to all the guests from the Filipino community, as well as visitors from Ontario and the U.S. Welcome to Manitoba, a province that we're all so proud of. I also want to say that it's been one of the highlights of this spring sitting that we've been able to welcome people back into the People's Building. And of course, I say the same to the pages. It sounds like we have two thoughtful, inspiring young people, so I wish you all the best in what's next. I do have a question on the situation in healthcare, but wanted to just say those few words. It's starting to feel like grad season around here, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and you see it's not all that bad. I too want to echo the comments from the opposition leader. Welcome everyone to the chamber here today. We appreciate you being with us. It seems like it's been a long couple of years since we've had people here. So nice to see so many people from all over, not just Manitoba, but other jurisdictions as well. It is nice to see family and friends of members in the gallery. That way we know for sure that those members will be on their best behavior, and that is appreciative. To all of our pages, certainly we appreciate the work that you're doing here every day, and we wish you all the best into the future. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, in welcoming our guests to the People's Building, I want them to know that one of the important functions we carry out here is to ensure that the services that Manitobans rely on are defended. Just so happens it's the folks on this side of the chamber who do that defending. On the issue of healthcare, our province-wide healthcare system, which cares for the sick, it cares for the elderly, that cares for those folks when they have accidents, has been in crisis for a number of years. That crisis was caused by the cuts and closures of emergency rooms, particularly like at the Grace Hospital. We know that this situation emerged before the pandemic, and it has gotten worse since. I'm going to table a document regarding the staffing at the Grace Hospital. It shows that paramedics are being asked to pick up additional shifts, not just to fill in a paramedic role, but to fill in for nurses as well, Madam Speaker. The situation continues to deteriorate. When is this government finally going to do something to help healthcare?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We certainly recognize the extra challenges that healthcare faces given the results of the pandemic over the last 2 years. Certainly, our government recognizes that. We're responding to requests from Manitobans to strengthen healthcare in Manitoba. That's why we have committed this year's budget $7.2 billion to healthcare. That is a new record investment in healthcare here in the province of Manitoba. We recognize there's challenges with staffing at various levels and various capacities. Those are not unique challenges to Manitoba. Every jurisdiction in the country is facing those challenges, but we've committed resources to make sure we strengthen healthcare.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, the challenge that this PC government has had with health care is that they cut resources in one area and then they try to draw down resources in another to backfill the issue that they themselves created. We saw that with the emergence of the surgical and diagnostic wait times. The fact is, people are waiting longer than ever for surgeries in Manitoba today because nurses had to be taken out of the operating rooms and sent to other areas with critical needs. The issue that I'm bringing forward today is repeating the same sort of mistakes in the emergency rooms. We have a shortage of nurses. They're now drawing on paramedics to fill in those staffing shortages on the nursing side. But then, Madam Speaker, what will that do to the situation with ambulances? We are already seeing Manitobans wait record long times to get an ambulance, and now paramedics are being drawn in further to the ERs. When will this government finally start to fix the staffing crisis they've created?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And let's set the record straight here. Record investments for resources in healthcare, $7.2 billion. Madam Speaker, we in Manitoba, along with every other jurisdiction in the country, just went through 2 years in a pandemic. Clearly, that stretched resources. We are investing in those resources. We want to put more nurses back here. We've committed 400 more places for education in terms of getting nurses back into hospitals to assist those patients. We recognize the challenges the pandemic has created. We are committed to strengthening healthcare, and that has been seen by a record investment of $7.2 billion in healthcare. Not to mention the $110 million we've committed to the diagnostic and surgery backlogs. We are responding to the requests from Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Again, Madam Speaker, the Deputy Premier's idea of responding to the needs of Manitobans is to take away from the needs that we have in other critical aspects of our healthcare system. The diagnostic and surgery waits grew because they took the nurses away from the operating rooms to address the staffing crisis they created in other areas of critical care. Now, potentially what we're seeing with the document that I tabled is that they're taking paramedics, the people who staff ambulances, away from the ambulances and putting them into an emergency room to address the short staffing of nurses that they themselves created when they closed the emergency rooms around Winnipeg in 2017, 18, 2019, Madam Speaker. Again, we see a situation where the staffing crisis gets worse and worse and worse, and it's the people of Manitoba who are left to shoulder the burden. What guarantees can the Deputy Premier provide the House today that their plan at the Grace Hospital won't increase wait times not only in the ER, but also for paramedics?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to take a moment and remind members of this House of the failed record of the former NDP government in an exchange that occurred in this chamber on June 9th, 2015, where a question was posed to then Health Minister Sharon Blady. Mr. Speaker, there is an ER crisis, and there are also regions in Manitoba. There are regions in Manitoba that are experiencing a critical doctor shortage. Because of that, 24 rural ERs are closed. When asked in estimates yesterday how she was going to address this issue, this Minister of Health said that she's still waiting for a, and I quote, magic healthcare wand. I would like to ask her, since last evening, did she find that wand? That is how the former NDP government handled our healthcare system.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Speaker, I'd like to ask what the PC Party of Manitoba stands for, because they do not stand for fiscal responsibility. Healthcare is getting worse, and they can't even calculate the actual value of their education rebate checks. They certainly don't stand for personal responsibility, because every day ministers try to blame everyone else but them for the crisis that they have created in the healthcare system. And they certainly do not stand for rural healthcare, because even as we speak, we see that this government has closed the emergency room at Powderview and Pine Falls. We see also that in St. Anne, the emergency room there has been closed without any consultation with the community. We see that countless emergency rooms are in the Interlake are forced to turn patients away. In many cases, it's one patient being turned away again and again and again. So what is it that the PC Party stands for? Because certainly they don't stand for healthcare in Manitoba, and certainly they do nothing to fix the cuts.
Order. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We stand for action. I'm tabling a news release from November of 1999 where the NDP announced a 5-point plan on how to end hallway medicine. They have no credibility, Madam Speaker. Health system leadership has acknowledged the challenges being experienced in emergency departments right now. They've implemented a number of initiatives in recent weeks, and those initiatives have come right from the hospital floor, Madam Speaker. And I thank all the leaders and staff for bringing forward the initiatives such as the $1.2 million expansion of the physician and triage model of care program, improving lab turnarounds, level loaded of transports, and more great ideas are coming forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
I want to thank the Minister of Health for tabling this document from the year in which I graduated high school. The reason that I want to thank her for tabling it is that it is proof, for when Gary Dewar fixed hallway medicine in Manitoba, Madam Speaker. And then we had this government come in. And what has this government done? Not only did they bring hallway medicine back to Manitoba, they brought highway medicine to Manitoba, where they see Manitoba patients sent to North Dakota and shipped out of province because we simply can't provide the care for them here that they need. Rest assured to the Minister of Health that this team is ready
just like Gary Dewar, to come in and fix the crisis they've created in healthcare, Madam Speaker. My question is simple. In advance of that, will they commit to causing no more damage to healthcare in the meantime?
The member's time has expired. Oh, is right. I did meet with the students in the hallway when I was out in the hallway, and I did indicate to them that there should be passion in debate, but there should be respect in the debate, and we should be demonstrating that democracy works. And I told them that they hopefully will see that in this chamber today. So let's try this out and see if we can actually show them that these things do work. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What we are committed to is not searching under our pillows at night for magic wands. We're not going to rely on pixie dust. We are going to rely on interventions that are coming forward from the hospital floor, listening to nurses, Madam Speaker, listening to clinicians, doctors, health system leadership. That's where the early interventions are being found, making changes to ambulance transport protocols, a pilot to test for COVID-19 within the emergency department for new patient arrivals. And we're refining our virtual COVID outpatient program that has helped thousands of Manitobans to stay at home and receive the care virtually. Madam Speaker, that is what
Member's
we're
time has expired. Order. The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Madam Speaker, Research Manitoba does important work. It supports local research and helps drive talented people in Manitoba in research and innovation. Unfortunately, public account shows funding to Research Manitoba has declined over the last few years, from 17 million down to 15 million, down to 12 million. When we asked about this in estimates, the minister seemed unaware of the cuts this government has made to Research Manitoba. So why doesn't the PC government value research and innovation? And will they reverse their cuts to Research Manitoba?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I do appreciate the question and the line of questioning the other day from the member opposite. Certainly we value the work at Research Manitoba. We're committing over $12 million this year to Research Manitoba for the good work they do. They do leverage other work and resources as well. So we're certainly committed to Research Manitoba. We're also committed to healthcare. That's why we have a record investment in healthcare this year of $7.2 billion. That's Manitoba's priority, and we're responding to Manitobans' priorities.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, I'll table a letter from the U of M President Benarach to the Minister of Advanced Education. He says, this reduction in Research Manitoba funding have meant our province is missing out on opportunities for economic growth. With additional funding, we can invest in high-quality research in impact areas for Manitoban and leverage federal funding to stay competitive in both Canada and internationally, end quote. This government's cuts are making Manitoba less competitive, and we are losing talented researchers to other jurisdictions. When will the minister reverse course, reverse his cuts to Research Manitoba?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And again, I appreciate the good work that the people at Research Manitoba are doing. I actually just had a conversation last night with Dr. Benarach from the University of Manitoba, and he was talking about all the money that the university was able to leverage for research. So I know he's been quite happy with the attraction of that investment. Certainly we're supporting the University of Manitoba with additional funding this year, and I know he's very supportive of that funding as well.
The honourable member for St. Vital on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, it's sadly clear that under this government, Manitoba is losing talented researchers to other jurisdictions. Research Manitoba helps to build local talent and helps to fuel economic development. Brian Pallister cut funding to Research Manitoba, and this premier has kept cutting, and it's down from $17 down to $12 million. President Benarach says that Manitoba is missing out on economic opportunities. Why is this government carrying out Brian Pallister's failed regressive approach? And when will they restore funding to Research Manitoba?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I know the members used the term cuts very loosely, and I think if the member would go back over the last 5 years, the funding has been pretty constant there. And notwithstanding the increases that the University of Manitoba have had, and notwithstanding the extra investments we've made in healthcare. And I will say the member probably doesn't realize this, but when it comes to the bioscience industry in Manitoba, we are the second largest exporter of product in Canada. A tremendous economic development opportunity that exists here in Manitoba, and we're going to try to expand that processing here in Manitoba.
Here.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, when I asked why this government hasn't purchased a ROSA machine to help children living with epilepsy, the Minister of Health touted additional beds in an adult epilepsy monitoring unit. I will give the minister another chance today to answer why her government has failed to purchase a ROSA machine to help children. It can't be lack of money because CEO Michael Schlater donated $2 million to purchase a ROSA machine. So why has this government failed to purchase a ROSA machine?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will reiterate my comments from yesterday's question. Our government remains committed to improving health care for Manitobans, and that includes strengthening neurology services and care for patients with multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, as well as improving our stroke services. We're recruiting and retaining neurologists, and 6 new neurologists have been recruited, 1 MS neurologist, 2 epilepsy, 2 stroke, and 1 cognitive neurologist. We continue to support staff in terms of coming into the program, as well as equipment. Madam Speaker, the members opposite may have missed the last 2 years of the unprecedented pandemic. Supply chains have been interrupted, and we are going to continue our
The member's time has expired. Order. The honourable member for Wolseley on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We did hear that the province said they had plans to purchase a ROSA machine back in December, but no timeline has been provided. But considering the province claimed they would purchase one 5 years ago, well before the pandemic, it's difficult to believe them. Neurology services in Manitoba are lacking, and you need to recruit because neurologists left, and one of them at least left the province because you didn't purchase a ROSA machine. There's a high vacancy rate in the adult and pediatric neurology, and the U of M's MS clinic is on the verge of collapse. Purchasing a ROSA machine would help support children living with epilepsy. So why has this government failed to do so for 5 years?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, again, our government remains committed to the neurology program, the epilepsy program, to children, Madam Speaker, to adults needing care. I was so pleased yesterday to join Premier, the Honourable First Minister at the Children's Hospital, where we were announcing the opening of the Heart Health Centre and the incredible donation and contribution from the Price family and several other donors.
Order!
To continue to come alongside families that have young children and adults who need care throughout our entire health system, Madam Speaker, contrary to what the member opposite is stating today.
The honourable member for Wolseley on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Manitobans have figured out that many of these health announcements are just photo ops that are meaningless because 5 years ago, the Minister of Health stood at HSC and received a $2 million check for a Rosa machine and a unit that has not been purchased. It's meaningless. So, will the province stop misleading Manitoba children and their families and commit to purchasing the Rosa machine? Will the minister commit to purchasing it this year, and will she commit to telling Manitobans when she has done so?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What a shameful comment to make, that the announcement we were part of yesterday at the Children's Hospital with the Price family, with hundreds of donors that were watching virtually and were there on Unit 4 to see the opening of a new heart health center that is going to help 6,000 children. I met Jackson, who received a new heart 5 years ago, Madam Speaker, and this member stands in the House and says that that is a photo op. The member needs to stand today and apologize to the Price family and to all the donors that contributed to that centre. Madam Speaker, that is the right thing for the member to do.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Madam Speaker, last week, Bill 8 was called to committee, and presenters raised serious concerns. The bill includes provisions that puts more power into the minister's hands to select judges, Madam Speaker. This is the politicization of selecting judges to sit in our courts. Manitoba has a strong judge selection process that's worked for the last 30 years, which includes quality input from sitting judges. Bill 8 waters down that process. Will the minister withdraw these provisions and support our amendments to Bill 8?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, it's the same provision that is used in Ottawa to select judges. Jagmeet Singh has joined a coalition with the Liberal government who apparently supports the same process in Ottawa, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
We heard from the Provincial Judges Association of Manitoba, the Manitoba Bar Association, and the Criminal Defence Lawyers. They all expressed concern with Bill 8. Bill 8 dilutes the presence of judges on the Judicial Appointment Committee with the minister's own hand-picked appointments. It removes the chief judge as the chair of the committee, and it changes what information is provided to the minister for judicial selection. Far more power is handed to the minister to turn the court into the direction that he chooses, Madam Speaker. Will he undo this and support our amendments that withdraw these provisions?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, it's the same provision that's used in Ottawa. It's been there for many years. It's supported by the Trudeau government, supported now by Jagmeet Singh and his coalition with the Trudeau government. I will certainly let Mr. Singh in Ottawa know that he has lost the confidence of the member of St. John's.
The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Presenters told us Bill 8 was introduced without the prior consultation of the Judicial Selection Committee, nor was there consultation done with the Law Reform Commission or the Law Society or the Provincial Court. No one, Madam Speaker, not one single person asked for these changes that the minister is bringing forward in Bill 8. It weakens the committee's independence from government and risks undermining public confidence in the appointment of judges, Madam Speaker. This is a naked attempt by the minister to get the judges that he wants appointed in our courts, Madam Speaker. You know who else did that? Trump, Madam Speaker. Will he commit to withdrawing these provisions, and will he support our amendments to Bill 8?
The member's time has expired. Order. I think members may want to hear what their minister has to say. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, I am shocked. I'm very disappointed that the member for St. John's compared Donald Trump to Jagmeet Singh. Madam Speaker, it is absolutely disgraceful. I, for one, will stand with Jagmeet Singh on this particular issue. They're doing it the right way in Ottawa, and we'll do it here as well, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member, order. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. Doris Trout, Rebecca Contois. The last 2 weeks we have seen murders of both of these young Indigenous women. Community members are distraught at the loss of these women, including Doris's 3 children. It's clear that the PC government is not doing enough to address the ever-growing violence against Indigenous women and children in Manitoba. What will it take for the Premier to take action on the critical issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, these are very serious issues, and we know that the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women has been something that Canada has been grappling with, that this province has been grappling with for many years, Madam Speaker. There's been significant work that has been done when it comes to bringing light to these issues, but there's no question that the loss of any individual and one Indigenous woman, one Indigenous two-spirited individual, another Indigenous person that's been lost, anybody that's been lost, Madam Speaker, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to the family. It's a tragedy to all Manitobans, Madam Speaker. And we commit ourselves, as I'm sure all members of this House commit themselves, to continue to ensure that more light is brought to these tragedies.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas on a supplementary question.
Far too many Indigenous women and girls have been murdered or gone missing in this province, including my sister Claudette Osborne-Tayo. We see that this violence has continued even after the province signed on to the MMIWG 2S National Inquiry Calls to Justice. Community and advocates are saying that this PC government is not doing enough to address this issue and actually doing the bare minimum. It's clear from the recent murders of Doris Trout and Rebecca Contois that this is true. What specific actions is the government taking to implement the calls to justice from the MMIWG 2S National Inquiry that will keep Indigenous women safe here in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, the member opposite brings a very personal and important voice to this critical issue, and I've appreciated when she's expressed that here in the House, and she's done it with compassion, she's done it with vigor, and she's done it in a way that I think all of us have learned from. I do know that when it comes to justice officials, they're working hard to ensure that where there are individuals who continue to be missing, that information is brought to the families. They're working with the Grand Chiefs and others within the Indigenous community, Madam Speaker. And I think all of us are dedicated to do as much as we can to ensure that this situation not only improves in Manitoba, but across Canada, and more light is brought to it, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas on the final supplementary.
Miigwech, the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls outlined 231 calls to justice. The province signed on to these calls and has responsibility to follow through on them. The recent murders of Indigenous women in Winnipeg have shown that taking action on these calls is critical. Community members want to know what the government is doing to prevent these murders from happening to Indigenous women and girls in our province. What specific actions is this government doing to keep women and girls safe in our community and preventing these deaths from happening?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Government of Manitoba, I express our sincere condolences to Rebecca Contois and Doris Trout's families, friends, and loved ones in communities of Crane River and God's Lake. We care and are with you. You're not alone in this grief. Women in Indigenous culture are sacred. They need to be treated with respect and dignity. And as a government, we will continue to support 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals. We will continue to speak out and take action against gender-based violence in our province, and we all have a role to play in taking action to end gender-based violence. And we encourage anyone with information or concerns that may help to bring those responsible for these horrific deeds to justice to reach out to Crime Stoppers at 204-786-8477.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a sad history in Manitoba of broken promises around MTS. In the 1995 election, the then PC Premier promised the publicly owned phone system would not be sold off, but it was. Prices went up, service declined, and Manitoba workers were laid off. 6 years ago this month, in 2016, MTS was bought by Bell, which promised to make Winnipeg its western headquarters and made a lot of noise about new investments. At the time, Brian Pallister supported the merger, even though people warned it would mean less competition, layoffs, higher prices, and worse service. Those warnings have come true, and the promises have not been kept. Instead of investments, some workers at MTS have seen 9 rounds of layoffs while service is worse and costs are going up. Is this government going to do anything to challenge MTS to keep its promises, or are Bell's shareholders more important than Manitobans?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question being raised by the NDP, or sorry, the Liberal leader. Certainly, I think over the last few days we've seen some issues raised by the public in terms of service being provided by Bell MTS. It certainly appears that the federal regulator has an eye on that particular situation. Certainly there's some oversight there in terms of making sure that Bell MTS do provide adequate and proper service to their customers. I'm sure the regulator will make sure that that happens.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We all know Manitoba's telephone service is abysmal, especially in rural and northern Manitoba, and MTS reduced its investments by $500 million. They've been cutting back, and workers and customers have both been feeling the pinch. Team IFTPE Local 161, which represents Bell MTS workers, says there have been 9 rounds of downsizing from their bargaining unit alone since the Bell MTS merger. The most recent one was just announced May 9th, targeting 31 positions. Since 2015, more than half of their jobs have been lost. 300 good Manitoba jobs lost in the last 5 years. Will the Premier join us and say, Bell, let's talk about why they're laying off hundreds of workers and breaking their promise to invest in Manitoba?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and certainly from our perspective as a government, any loss of jobs is very unfortunate. Certainly there is competition in this field, and we certainly think that there are opportunities for competition as well. Clearly, Madam Speaker, I know from a job perspective and a labor perspective, there certainly is opportunity for Manitobans to get to work. All kinds of labor challenges across pretty well every sector, and quite frankly, across every portion of Manitoba. So there will be tremendous opportunities for any layoffs that may have occurred with this particular company. And we certainly, from our perspective as government as well, we've committed to over $100 million to make sure that Manitobans have the skills and talent that's required in the workforce.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, as I wrote to the Minister, there's a need for an adjustment in the treatment for opioid addictions as now provided at RAM clinics. In brief, addiction physicians are unable to start people on treatment with Suboxone or similar medications immediately when a person needs it if the person doesn't have money and doesn't have the medication coverage through EIA and IHB or private insurance. Since addiction treatment needs to be started as soon as a person is ready and can then immediately reduce the risk of overdose, the impact of the therapy would be much better if the government would cover 6 months of opioid agonist therapy for such individuals. Will the government consider this life-saving measure?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And our government has made major investments into mental health and addictions over the last few years, and a number of those initiatives have saved lives. We will continue to invest in the data-driven treatments to help Manitobans address their addictions issues. I'd be happy to sit down with the member opposite and further discuss some of our harm reductions and our treatment options that we are offering to Manitobans.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Midland? No? The Honourable Member for Midland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As small businesses look to economic recovery, it is more important than ever that governments commit to reducing costly red tape to make it easier to do business in Manitoba. Can the Minister of Justice expand on how Manitoba ranks compared to other provinces when it comes to making life more affordable for small businesses and their workers?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, I'd like to thank the member for Midland for the question. I know he's a strong advocate for small business, Madam Speaker, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business recently released a report on how provinces were doing in helping small businesses by reducing red tape, and they said that Manitoba got an A on their report card, the best score in all of the country, Madam Speaker. Particularly important coming out of the pandemic when small businesses were so impacted, Madam Speaker. I know why the NDP are upset, Madam Speaker. They're upset because if they look back at their track record on the same report card, in 2011 they got an F, in 2012 they got another F, in 2013, they got to work and they got a D. In 2014, they got another D. And then they really got to work. In 2015, they got another D, Madam Speaker. Manitobans can't afford to go back to the NDP, Madam Speaker, because what comes with the NDP is a tsunami of red tape.
The Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Madam Speaker.
Order.
So I'm going to take...
Order. Order. I have recognized the Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to table next week's schedule for the emergency departments in the Interlake, and more often than not, there's no doctor available. Pine Falls ER is suspended. Madam Speaker, Diane Malcolm is a resident of Lundar, and earlier this month she feared she was having a heart attack. She called Ericsdale, no ER doctor. She phoned Ashern, overwhelmed, couldn't come. Phoned Stonewall, told to go to Ericsdale. So she went there, only to be put in an ambulance that had to park on the side of the road to try and figure out where to take a potential heart attack victim. Madam Speaker, this is not acceptable. So for people like Ms. Malcolm, what is the minister doing with the mess of the Interlake Health Region so that people can actually get a doctor at an ER?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Flin Flon for the question. And it's unfortunate that the member did not join us for the Northern Health Sustainability discussion that was held last week in Thompson. Many individual service delivery organizations, EMS, physicians came together around the table of solutions to talk about how we address the needs of rural and northern Manitoba, Madam Speaker. Our government has already taken proactive steps by investing $812 million to create 38 projects and initiatives that will form a northern northern hub and allow for individuals living in the north to receive care closer to home, Madam Speaker. We will continue to sit at the table of solutions.
The time has expired. The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to the petition is as follows. 1. Across the province, many Manitobans continue to struggle with addictions, and the pandemic has led to even more deaths and worsened the ongoing public health crisis of opioid overdoses. 2. 372 Manitobans died from an overdose in 2020. That's over 1 a day and 87% higher than in 2019. 3. Manitoba is expected to exceed over 400 overdose deaths in 2021, but the data is not publicly available since the last public reporting of opioid deaths was published in 2019. 4. The data from drug overdose deaths from 2020 and 2021 was compiled through media inquiries, and this needs to change. 5. Access to timely data on the harms of drugs helps to inform both government and stakeholders on where to take action and target resources needed in various communities. 6. Manitoba is the only province not providing regular, timely data to the federal government opioid information portal. 7. Manitobans deserve a government that takes the growing drug crisis seriously and will report the data publicly in a timely manner to target actions and allow for accountability. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows.
Urge the member to continue.
To urge the provincial government to enact Bill 217, the Fatalities Inquiries Amendment Act overdose death reporting, to require the province to publish the number of drug overdose deaths as well as the type of drug on a government website in a timely fashion. And this has been signed by many Manitobans.
In accordance with our Rule 132(6), when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, the spike in catalytic converter thefts occurring across North America has hit Winnipeg. The price of precious metals in catalytic converters like rhodium, palladium, and platinum are worth thousands of dollars an ounce. Scrap metal recyclers have catalytic converters priced to the vehicle, with some catalytic converters worth $800. Number 2, organized groups of criminals are climbing under vehicles and cutting catalytic converters, selling them to scrap metal recyclers for cash without any record of these transactions. Number 3, catalytic converter thefts cost consumers about $2,000 for each replacement. Manitoba Public Insurance charges a betterment fee for new replacements, so insurance doesn't cover the full cost. Number 4, catalytic converters do not have any part number or vehicle identification number, VIN, and the inability to tie catalytic converter to a specific vehicle is a major enforcement issue. Number 5, engraving of a vehicle's VIN on its catalytic converter would be a major deterrent to theft by tying the vehicle to the part and making enforcement possible. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to bring in consumer protection legislation directing Manitoba Public Insurance to initiate credits to Manitobans for engraving vehicle identification numbers on their catalytic converters. And this petition is signed by many, many Manitobans.
Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. A hearing aid is a battery-powered electronic device designed to improve an individual's ability to perceive sound. Worn in or behind a person's ear, they make some sounds louder, helping people hear better when it's quiet and when it's noisy. People who suffer hearing loss, whether due to aging, illness, employment, or accident, not only lose the ability to communicate effectively with friends, family, or colleagues, they also can experience unemployment, social isolation, and struggles with mental health. Hearing loss can impact the safety of an individual with hearing loss, as it affects the ability to hear cars coming, safety alarms, call 911, etc. A global commission on the state of the research for dementia care and prevention released an updated consensus report in July 2020, identifying 12 key risk factors for dementia and cognitive decline. The strongest risk factor that was indicated was hearing loss. It's calculated that up to 8% of the total number of dementia cases could potentially be avoided with management of hearing loss. Hearing aids are therefore essential to the mental health and well-being of Manitobans, especially to those at significant risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, a disorder of the brain affecting cognition in the ever-growing senior population. Audiologists are healthcare professionals who help patients decide which kind of hearing aid will work best for them based on the type of hearing loss, patient's age, and ability to manage small devices, lifestyle, and ability to afford. The cost of hearing aids can be prohibitive to many Manitobans depending on their income and circumstances. Hearing aids cost on average $995 to $4,000 per ear, and many professionals say the hearing aids only work at their best for 5 years. Manitoba residents under the age of 18 who require a hearing aid, as prescribed by an otolaryngologist or audiologist, will receive either an 80% reimbursement from Manitoba Health or a fixed amount for an analog device, up to a maximum of $500 per year, or 80% of a fixed amount for a digital or analog programmable device, up to a maximum of $1,800. However, this reimbursement is not available to Manitobans who need the device who are over the age of 18, which will result in financial hardship for many young people entering the workforce, students, and for families. In addition, seniors representing 14.3% of Manitoba's population are not eligible for reimbursement despite being the group most likely in need of a hearing aid. Most insurance companies only provide a minimal partial cost of a hearing aid, and many Manitobans, especially retired persons, old age pensioners, and other low-income earners do not have access to health insurance plans. The province of Quebec's Hearing Devices Program covers all costs related to hearing aids and assistive listening devices, including the purchase, repair, and replacement. Alberta offers subsidies to all seniors 65 and over and low-income adults once every 5 years. New Brunswick provides coverage for the purchase and maintenance not covered by other agencies or private health insurance plans, as well as assistance for those for whom the purchase would cause financial hardship. Manitobans over age 18 are only eligible for support for hearing aids if they're receiving employment and income assistance, and the reimbursement only provides a maximum of $500 per year. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to consider hearing loss as a medical treatment under Manitoba Health, to urge the provincial government to provide income-based coverage for hearing aids to all who need them, as hearing has been proven to be essential to Manitobans' cognitive, mental, and social health and well-being. Signed by Gladys Nielsen, Skylar Polkowski, Josiah Polkowski, and many, many others.
Grievances. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On May 17th, 2022, the House unanimously passed Private Member's Resolution number 15, calling on the federal government to extend the time frame for Indian Day School survivors. Could you please canvass the House for leave to request that the Speaker of the House send copies of this PMR, number 15, to the Prime Minister of Canada and the Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Is there leave to request that the Speaker of the House send copies of the private member's resolution number 15 to the Prime Minister of Canada and Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations? Is there leave? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you please resolve the House into Committee of Supply?
So under orders of the day, government business, we have been told that it has been announced that the House will consider estimates this afternoon. The House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair.
Notice. So if I'm on duty, I have to be here. Well, that's up to you, not me. No, but I meant like I don't have the option here virtually. Right, but not. I didn't know the minister didn't be attended virtually. Here? Well, sure. Sounds a lot. Staff, right?
No, we still have another table and chairs to go. Oh, right, but we don't, we need a chair. Yeah.
That's fine. Start without the chairs. Let's get going.
Hey, Minister, it's the chair here. I just want to get a sound check and make sure you're ready to go. Can you just say something?
Sure, I'm ready to go. If you can hear me all right?
I can hear you.
We can't see you. We lost your video.
Oh, we lost your video. There we go.
Could you get him to do it again?
Can you say something again, please, Minister?
He's muted.
Now you're mute.
Okay, can you hear me now? But again, we lose the video.
Okay.
Can you hear me? But when I
can
click
hear
on my
you.
mic, I lose the video. Just hang on a second here.
It's like when you are.
There's a chair right there for him. It's just here.
There is. When you speak, your video cuts out.
If he's
Yeah, we're working on that
turning
right
his
now to
camera
try and
off.
rectify that.
He may be accidentally turning his camera off too,
I'm told that you might be accidentally turning off your camera
when you're unmuted.
when you unmute.
I think it's on purpose.
That shouldn't be happening.
That's beyond my word.
Minister, in the interest of time, if it's not a quick fix, because I do believe we need to see you in order for this to go forward, you're more than welcome to come and set up with your staff down here if that's just an easy fix. Well, it is an easy fix. You're more than welcome to do that. Minister, are you there? Okay, I can see you.
His mute's on.
Your mute is on.
Okay. Can you unmute?
Okay, now do we have video
So we're
and?
losing him.
No, we don't.
Okay, yeah, Minister, we lose you when you talk. We lose seeing you when you talk. So, so how are we going to move forward here?
I think they want to try one more time here.
Try it one more time? Sure. Minister, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Hearing
can't
you.
see.
Yeah.
And see?
And I can see you now too.
Okay, great.
There we go. Okay, so Minister, you ready to start?
Mr. Critic?
I am.
Okay, the critic's ready as well. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement? Honourable Minister, do you have an opening statement?
I do.
Honourable Minister, go ahead.
I am pleased to be able to comment on the 2022-23 estimates and discuss some of the important activities of the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, the Dakota Oyate, the Dene Nihe, and the Nehe Towag nations. I want to further acknowledge that Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis, and that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to all of our partners and our staff. Through their hard work, we have and will achieve many successes. The Department's 2022-23 estimates of expenditures total $31.1 million and continues to provide the resources required to address the challenges and pressures of delivering on our department's far-reaching and increasingly complex mandate. Of specific note, I am pleased to note that Budget 2022 provides the department with enhanced capacity through the allocation of funding for up to 13 additional staff positions. This enhanced staffing capacity builds on the 4 positions added in 2021-22, which will be directed towards enhancing engagement and reconciliatory activities. I'm also pleased to note that Budget 2022 includes a $5 million allocation that will be made available to advance progress on reconciliation. This funding will be used for a range of activities, including but not limited to enhancing partnerships with Indigenous communities, maintaining and strengthening support for culture and language, addressing the tragic legacy of residential schools, and actions that respond to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the calls for justice of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Budget 2022 positions us to continue to advance our strategic priorities, and I would like to take a moment to highlight some of our other significant activities. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted us in too many ways to count, and it has challenged us on a wide variety of fronts. We will continue to work with Northern leaders, partners, and stakeholders to ensure a timely and consistent response to the impacts of the pandemic. This includes maintaining communications with First Nations leadership, the Red River Métis, regional health authorities, and First Nation Inuit Health Branch and Shared Health to coordinate information, bring awareness to localized planning challenges, demographics, and available supports to the North. We are committed to the implementation of various public health recommendations, and a variety of steps have been specifically focused on stemming the tide of COVID-19 in the North. Efforts include regular engagement with Indigenous and Northern leadership and a focused vaccination strategy targeting First Nations and Northern communities who are at greater risk for severe COVID-19 health impacts. We are pleased to be working in partnership with the health experts representing Manitoba, Kuwait-Nawi, Wikimakinac, the Southern Chiefs Organization, and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs in the planning and administration of vaccines to First Nations people in Manitoba. We will continue to work with all provincial counterparts to ensure that all Manitobans have access to vaccination and booster doses to protect against COVID-19. Treaty land entitlement continues to be a priority of Manitoba. There are 9 treaty land entitlement agreements in Manitoba, covering 29 entitlement First Nations, for a total of approximately 1.423 million acres of crown and acquisition land. Continued progress on treaty land entitlement is one way in which we are pursuing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. As of March 31st, 2022, Manitoba has transferred 694,663 acres to Canada under all treaty land entitlement agreements in Manitoba. Canada has set apart 677,170 acres as reserve land. Manitoba Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations has also allocated 500,000 as part of a renewed approach to advancing treaty land entitlement in Manitoba. The government of Manitoba has committed to establishing a renewed framework for respectful and productive Crown Indigenous consultation. A key outcome of the renewed framework will include improved understanding of the Crown Indigenous consultation process for all parties. We are following up with Indigenous communities to summarize recent feedback received on the framework and invite additional comments. We continue to welcome proposals to work together on a renewed approach to the Crown's duty to consult and accommodate with Indigenous communities. We remain committed to advancing reconciliation through concrete and tangible initiatives that build on meaningful engagement with Indigenous nations and people, and we continue to carry out work to advance the process of reconciliation in Manitoba. Our work is guided by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action, the calls for justice of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and the principles outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Department fully appreciates the importance of culturally relevant and healthy food systems in the North, and we continue to support these systems through our Northern Healthy Foods Initiative. I am pleased to report that we have recently provided an allocation of $193,000 to Northern Healthy Foods Initiative partners to supplement their existing activities and help improve access to affordable healthy food in the North. We have continued to maintain our annual funding commitments to 11 Indigenous organizations for their core operating grants. Of specific note, I am happy to announce that Manitoba Inuit Association will become a recipient of one of our core operating grants. In addition to core operating grants, we have also continued to provide financial support for a wide variety of community-based initiatives, including, but not limited to, healing, commemorative, and educational initiatives connected to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Awareness Days. Addressing violence against Indigenous women and girls, particularly incidences of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, is a priority of Manitoba. We are committed to working together to keep women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people safe, and to supporting families who have been impacted by these tragedies. We have taken a variety of steps to fulfill this commitment, including engaging with approximately 42 individual community organizations to solicit their perspectives on priorities as related to the National Inquiry's calls to justice. We are providing $130,000 to the Mama Wichita Center for the co-development of a provincial implementation plan to raise awareness and end violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples in Manitoba. We are continuing to work with the federal government and other provinces and territories in relation to Canada's efforts to respond to the calls to justice. The tragic identification of potential unmarked graves of children who died attending Indian residential schools across the country has sparked a nationwide conversation on the tragedy and lasting impacts of Canada's residential school system. Addressing the tragic legacy of residential schools is a priority for Manitoba, especially with respect to supporting Indigenous-led searches to locate the missing children who attended these institutions. We know that Indigenous communities must take the lead on this work, and we continue to meet with Indigenous leadership, knowledge keepers, elders, and residential school survivors to guide a response that reflects and advances their priorities. To support this work, we have committed $2.5 million to begin the work of supporting the identification, investigation, protection, and commemoration of Indian residential school burial sites across the province. The First Nations and Inuit, the Red River Métis Council on Residential Schools has also been established to support Indigenous-led searches for burial sites of children who attend residential schools. The council is also co-chaired by the province of the Southern Chiefs Organization and has representation from Indigenous organizations and governments, including the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, the Southern Chiefs Organization, Manitoba Kootenai Okimakanak, the Manitoba Métis Federation, and the Manitoba Inuit Association. In conclusion, we remain committed to working positively and respectfully with Indigenous Northern communities across Manitoba to make decisions and directing resources to areas that will make a true difference. I wish to reiterate our commitment to working with Indigenous Northern peoples to advance shared goals and promote truth and reconciliation. We are fully committed to listening and learning and look forward to the meaningful dialogue, engagement, and co-development approaches that are to come.
The minister's time has expired. Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments? We thank the minister for those comments. Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments? There. The honourable member for Kiwatanuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the minister for those opening comments this afternoon. Just a few short things before we get started, because I do want to get into the questions. Reconciliation seems to be a buzzword almost, if you want to say that, in regards to this government's response to a lot of issues that are raised by First Nations and Indigenous people here in Manitoba. But it really seems that's all it is just the word that they want to use, and the action's not really following that up. In terms of even the minister's appointment, and of course we all know the minister, but was appointment under the former premier, Brian Pallister, and it's very well known how his feelings were towards Indigenous people and in regards to reconciliation here in the province. So what we really want to be able to see, and what we haven't seen so far, is truly, and you've heard this word also, the all-of-government approach, and we're not seeing that on Indigenous issues in the Indigenous ministry. In fact, when issues are raised, and there's a wide variety of issues from, excuse me, infrastructure, healthcare, education, transportation, connectivity, across a number of different ministries and a number of different departments, that still it's referred to the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations, even though that may not be the file that's best suited to be able to address the concerns and answer the questions. So that just goes to kind of the thought process of the government and the silos that they seem to be working in on Indigenous issues and the Indigenous file from this government. And we were hoping that would change, and I'm hoping the minister has been open to that, and we are seeing kind of hopefully some bright spots to be able to work together, to work collaboratively on, not only across the aisle here in the chamber, but for the minister and this government to work with Indigenous communities, more specifically, more importantly, on these files, to which they can truly answer those questions and not just refer them to a different department that really has nothing to do with the issue at hand. So I'm hoping that across these next few hours, few days of estimates, we can bring some clarity to the minister's role and the voice that actually this department has in government to be able to take those issues forward and not just kind of talk the talk without having any kind of backup to that or any kind of real commitments to be able to do that. Per to say, just using the words of reconciliation and working collaboration and those types of phrases that this government seems to address on this file on a regular basis without any real action. So I'm hoping going forward that we can have that discussion, we can have that openness, and I know the minister has been. We've had a couple of chats kind of offline on a number of different issues, so I'm hoping we can bring that to be more than just offline chats, but actually bring some of those things to fruition here in the province and in the government, and be able to actually have those issues that are being raised, because we are hearing not just different issues, but we're hearing the same issues. When I say we, I see me as well as the minister are hearing those same issues. So we're hoping we can bring forth those issues on behalf of Indigenous people here in Manitoba and be able to come up to some kind of concrete, long-lasting solutions to the issues that have been generations in the mix here. So with that being said, Mr. Chair, I'll conclude my comments there and get into the questions.
We thank the critic from the official opposition for those remarks. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. So accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 19.1a contained in Resolution 19.1. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and I would ask the minister and critic to please introduce their staff in attendance. I'll just add minister, as I cannot see when your staff have arrived. If you could signal to me, I will give you the floor to introduce your staff once you would like to do so. Just give me a wave or say hello and we'll move forward with that. Minister, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. The Honourable Minister?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, Minister.
Okay, thank you. I'm joined here today by Michelle Dubik, my Deputy Minister, by Mike Sosiak, the ADM Executive Financial Officer, by George Bugoa, Acting Director of Financial Services, Scott DeJagger, Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives, Paul Doolin, Executive Director of the Northern Affairs Branch, and Chelsea Silva, Executive Director of the Consultation and Reconciliation Branch.
Thank you, Minister. We certainly welcome those staff to this afternoon. Would the opposition critic like to introduce their staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm joined by
Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
We'll get there, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce Ryler Amirantz. He's our legislative researcher for our caucus.
Thank you. In accordance with Sub-Rule 7716, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put on the resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of hopefully just simple housekeeping questions. Can the minister undertake to give us a list of all the technical appointments in his department, including their names and titles?
Minister, are you ready? Honourable Minister, go ahead.
So I have two technical individuals in my department, Special Assistant to the Minister, Eric Edwards, and I have an Executive Assistant to the Minister, Maya Bacchus.
The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister undertake to give an organizational chart that lists all of the employees and program areas in this department?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister, go ahead.
Yes, we can endeavor to provide that. Would you like us to have somebody walk it down?
If the Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk?
Sure, as long as it's not the minister himself. That doesn't take from estimates process.
The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
Can the minister also provide us with a list of current vacancies in the department?
Minister, go ahead and just as a technical formality, I think your picture on my screen is quite small, but when you say something, you get maximized on the screen. So just feel free to say Mr. Chair or something like that, and then I'll be able to recognize you. But Honourable Minister, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as of February the 22nd, we had 23 vacancies. 10 of those have been filled since then. And we are in the progress of filling 5 more, and 7 are still vacant. If the member would like more details, we would have to do another report with a new update for him.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, if the minister can take that under advisement to be able to bring that that chart to the committee. I have a couple of questions and some comments about the residential school and the residential school process and system here in Manitoba. And of course, the minister did not start off in his role on the best of terms and the best of abilities that came out in regards to the day of actually when the minister was sworn in, and the comments on the residential schools, and they were widely denounced as harmful and false and inaccurate and insensitive to Indigenous people here in Manitoba and across Canada. Can the minister tell us if he's taken any kind of reconciliation training or any kind of informational sessions to further educate himself on the residential school system here in Manitoba?
You know what, I think. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think the member opposite knows that since my swearing in, I was on a listening and learning journey throughout Manitoba. I immediately set out to meet with Indigenous communities, First Nations communities throughout northern Manitoba. I've met with elders, I've met with survivors, I've met with their families, I've met with knowledge keepers. In particular, I went to OCN in Nepal, part of my journey, and we attended the Guy Hill residential school site and listened to the survivors' stories on the site. Very heart-wrenching, very concerning. And since the beginning of my journey, I continue to meet with elders, with leadership, with survivors, and continue to hear their stories. I have given my deepest apologies to the First Nations peoples on my remarks that were made initially. With those, I wish I would have had time to finish my comments that I was starting to make there. I myself am the son of an Indian day school survivor, and knowing that, I now understand a lot more about the man he was and what shaped him to become the man that he was. He was not an easy man. He had difficulty showing affection to anyone, and including anyone close to him. And he did have issues. I myself went to it's called the Sacred Heart School in Nepal. And the same individuals that taught at the Guy Hill School, residential school, taught in my school. And I'm sure that they used the same techniques in my school as they did in the residential school. I was given the strap one day because my pencil was too short. It caused my wrists to swell, that I had difficulty writing. So on a spelling test, the teacher couldn't read what I'd written. So resulted in another strap. I've been made to stand against the blackboard, looking at bodies burning in hell as penance for wearing a pair of moccasins one day. Moccasins that I'm so proud of. But they were new, and there was an odor. And the teachers didn't think that that was acceptable. So hearing the stories from the elders and the survivors brought back those painful memories. And I could relate to what they went through in their days in the residential school. I was lucky, I got to go home in the evening. The residential school students didn't. They had to endure that same group in the evening and endure even more mental and physical abuse. There's no justification for what happened in the residential school system. And we need to learn from that and hopefully build a better future for our children and all Canadians.
The minister's time has expired. The honourable member for Kiiwetinoong.
Yes, I'd like to thank the minister for sharing his story and showing that that vulnerability that a lot of people are afraid to show for fear of retribution or fear of being kind of isolated for just being human. So I thank the minister for sharing those comments, his family story, his own family as well as his own experience, which isn't, while every story is unique, we know the stories are very similar. So I'd like to thank the minister again for sharing that, and it's I realize a lot of times those kind of things are difficult to get perhaps caught up in the moment and not even realize you're sharing your story and being being vulnerable and exposing yourself. So I really want to show appreciation. Thank the minister for sharing that. And it also goes to show the importance of moving forward in a true spirit of reconciliation for all involved. A couple of weeks ago now, we passed the Opposition Day motion, and I'm very grateful for the House for being able to unanimously pass that motion that called for the Pope to, on his visit to Canada, to include Manitoba as part of his visit, which specifically in the motion called for him to bless the graves of residential school children here in Manitoba, including the grave of Louis Riel. So we understand the importance of that visit and what that would mean to Indigenous people here in Manitoba. And it's in some cases it's meant with a lot of different emotions. Some people and some individuals and some families don't want to see that, and some do want to see that in terms of moving forward. We've seen it. I think most members have seen a copy of the motion itself, including the letter from the Speaker. So I would ask the minister if he in fact has received any communication back from the Vatican as to whether or not the Pope is going to perhaps include Manitoba on his visit, and if there was any further advocacy that either the minister was doing or the government was doing to make this visit to Manitoba a reality.
The Honourable Minister.
I had worked with the delegations that went over to meet with the Pope previously, and they had delivered the message that we were trying to encourage the Pope to include Manitoba on part of his visit to Canada. I know we had talked about sending a letter, but when the resolution came through, I believe that just the resolution was going to be sent to the Pope for consideration. I have not had an opportunity to talk to the individuals from the Métis delegation that went over as to the response that the Pope gave when they were there. I did have an opportunity, though, to meet with our Assembly of First Nations Chief Cindy Woodhouse when she returned. Actually, Chief Woodhouse, when she returned, came to the legislature and wanted to know if there was an opportunity for her to meet with me without being announced, and with the Premier, which we both agreed to. And when Chief Woodhouse came, she had actually brought with her rosaries that were sent from the Pope and personally blessed from the Pope to give to both of us, to encourage us to continue on our efforts at reconciliation in the province. It was a very touching moment to receive these directly from the Pope himself, specifically to give to both the Premier and myself. So, when I have tried to follow up a little bit with the Church, and I understand that the Pope's health is not very, very good. His mobility is not very good. We had talked about if we could get him to Manitoba, was there an opportunity that we might be able to bring him out to Portage la Prairie for the day? The individuals I talked to told me that the Pope is very limited in his mobility, and a trip like that would be far more than he could handle, which was why they decided just to go to, I believe it's Edmonton, in the prairies here. I think there's a stop in Quebec, the prairies in the Northwest Territories, I think he's only making 3 stops, all areas that he can fly into and get around very easily in.
The honourable member for Kiwatanuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's Quebec City, Edmonton, and Iqaluit that are the visits, but obviously that would be disappointing for a number of First Nations and Indigenous people here in Manitoba, that if there wasn't any kind of further advocacy on that part. And not to speak to anybody's health, but at the same time, I mean, you can also fly into Winnipeg, so that's something that's a little bit difficult to comprehend. Can the minister mentioned the $2.5 million that was earmarked for the search for unmarked grave sites. Can the minister tell us how many residential school sites have been examined for unmarked graves and where?
Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for that question. Currently in Manitoba, there are 18 locations of former Canadian government Indian residential schools. And I'm currently getting a list of the ones that are being actively searched with ground penetrating radar. Addressing the tragic legacy of the residential schools is a priority for Manitoba, especially to support Indigenous led searches to locate the missing children who attended these institutions and to memorialize them. We know that Indigenous communities must take the lead on this work, and we continue to meet with Indigenous leadership, knowledge keepers, elders, residential school survivors to guide a response that reflects and advances their priorities. Manitoba recognizes that First Nations, Métis and Inuit children attended residential schools across the province and supports distinction-based discussions to guide the way on finding the children who died at these institutions. The searches are providing or proving to be very complex, and the process, we need to recognize that multifaceted Indigenous-led approach is required, involving the collaboration of various levels of government. And through meaningful discussions with Indigenous leadership, communities, elders, survivors, and their families, we have heard that high-quality searches guided by the families of missing children and survivors is a priority. Our government remains committed to working in partnership with Indigenous communities, the elders, the knowledge keepers, the survivors, and families to commemorate and protect the unmarked graves of children who died attending residential schools. Some examples of our work include the provision, as the member had said, of $2.5 million to support Indigenous organizations and governments to enable a distinctions-based Indigenous-led process, placing survivors, families, and communities at the center of this work. The establishment of a First Nations Inuit Red River Métis Council that meets bi-weekly with Indigenous organizations and governments, federal and municipal counterparts, and the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation to share information and co-develop principles, structures, and resources to support communities. The provision of technical assistance to communities requesting this kind of support during their searches, and ongoing interdepartmental work to reduce barriers and to develop policies and potential legislation that will advance community efforts. We are partnering closely with Indigenous-led organizations to provide healing through traditional Indigenous ceremonies, safe mental health approaches, and holistic community-based care. This is why we're investing $500,000 in funding for 10 residential school healing centers across the province to provide emotional, cultural, spiritual, and mental health supports to former residential school survivors and their families. The current sites with active ground penetrating radar are Brandon Residential School, Fort Alexander, St. Joseph's Cross Lake, the McKay Residential School in Nepal, Sandy Bay, and Portage La Prairie.
The honourable member for Kiwatanuk.
So can the minister say how much of the $2.5 million that was announced for the residential, the unmarked graves, how much of that has been expensed so far?
Honourable Minister.
Yes, with respect to the $2.5 million, there were discussions at tables with a number of groups, and a Indian residential school council was developed with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit representation. And as of now, all of the $2.5 million has been flowed to the organizations. When the blackout lifts, we will be working in partnership with MKO, SCO, the MMF, MIA, AMC, and Sioux Valley to make an announcement. And I look forward to speaking further with the member opposite on this, and would like to see him at the announcement when we have a chance to do it following the blackout period.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the minister has mentioned that the $2.5 million has now been expensed and flowed to the organizations and the groups that are going to be overseeing this. Will there be additional funds earmarked for this search also, if the $2.5 million is not enough? And I think clearly at this point in time we're seeing that it is most definitely not enough if it's already been kind of flowed through already, and we still have a number of communities that are still looking and searching and looking for assistance to search sites themselves. So is the minister willing to commit additional funds, and if so, how much?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to the monies that are being forwarded, we felt that we owed it to the children who were forced to attend the Canadian residential schools across the nation to remember the tragedies of the past and to use the lessons learned to build a better future. With that, as a government, our immediate goal was to understand Manitoba's role and responsibilities and the priorities of those that were effective. So with that, we actively engaged in dialogue with Indigenous leadership, the communities, the families, the survivors, the elders, the knowledge keepers. And from our discussions, it was clear those we engaged with desired an Indigenous-led process, and we respect these wishes and agree with that approach. Will additional funds be allocated? I'm sure the member opposite understands that this is a very complex and ongoing process, and it's not something that's going to be completed in a year. it could take 10 years for this process to be completed. And during that time period, we are committed to working collaboratively with our partnerships, with survivors, with the families, with the communities, and we'll work with them on identifying priorities. And we will also be working with our federal counterparts to address this very serious concern. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the minister for actually making the point, though, that the fact that the $2.5 million is nowhere near enough. He mentioned how long this process could take, and I mean it's going to be a generation or generations even to be able to rectify and complete this kind of work, which may never reach completion to the full satisfaction of all the families and communities that are affected. So I thank the minister for making the point of the fact that there will in fact be further investments needed on behalf of his government to be able to do that. I wanted to touch on Orange Shirt Day. September 30th is Orange Shirt Day here in Manitoba. And it's a day to reflect on the impact of the residential school system. It's a day for mourning, it's a day for healing for many Indigenous people here in Manitoba. But it's also a day to educate. And it's important to have the time and have the ability to take that time to have those conversations. And if we want to truly stand in solidarity with survivors, excuse me, and honor the lost children, there was many, and there is continuous to this day, and hopefully even more so, additional Orange Shirt Day events in the communities, in the urban areas, and we need to take that as an opportunity to learn more about the residential school system and what Orange Shirt Day truly means. However, I mean, on the federal level, it's been recognized as a holiday, but we still have not done that here in the province. And that's why we brought forth Bill 200, the Orange Shirt Day Statutory Holiday Act, to be able to give people that time to have those conversations. There was a lot of confusion, for example, this past September 30th, as to what that may entail for people having to go to work. Schools, some schools still had school, some schools didn't. Some schools took the time to have a lot of Orange Shirt Day focused events and residential school informative sessions in their school. But it's also a time to be able to truly educate. It's not simply a matter of a day off for individuals to be able to have as a non-working day. It's about education. So I'm wondering, is the minister believe that making Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday would help educate Manitobans on the history and adverse impacts of residential school, and not have the confusion of saying, I'd like to have these conversations, I'd like to be able to attend these events, I'd like to be able to show solidarity, but in fact, because I work in a certain area, whether it be provincial or federal, I in fact can't take that time to do that and have those conversations. So does the minister believe that making Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday would help this process?
The Honourable Minister.
So I thank the member for his comments, and I appreciate everything he's saying and bringing forward, and want to reaffirm that the government of Manitoba is committed to advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Manitoba, and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is an important part of this journey, and we will be honoring that day, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which is a new federal statutory holiday, was introduced through the passing of Bill C-5. It is observed on September 30th, which is also known as Orange Shirt Day. The establishment of this day was recommended in Call to Action number 80. This is a day to recognize and reflect on the tragedies and the history of the ongoing legacy of residential schools, honor their survivors, and remember the children who did not return home. The Manitoba Public Service recognized the federal statutory holiday through the closure of non-essential government services and offices for the day. This provided the public servants with the opportunity to recognize the history and impacts of residential schools. The flags were lowered to half-mast on all provincial government buildings, and the Manitoba Legislative Building was lit in orange. So September 30th is also classified as a non-instructional day under the Public Schools Act. Schools were closed and no classes were held. Teachers were required to spend the day at school learning about truth and reconciliation. The day applies to federal workers and those in federally regulated employers, for example, banks and federal public service, air transport, radio, television. But the federal government does not have the authority to implement statutory holidays within provincial regulated industries. So employers who are subject to collective agreements that guarantee the federal statutory holidays will be adopted, regardless of any provincial action, are also required to observe the holiday. Such employers include the core Manitoba Public Service, Crown corporations, healthcare agencies, post-secondary institutions, and school divisions. Other employers in Manitoba choose to honor the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in ways tailored to their environments. Numerous businesses adopted or opted to close in observance of the day, while others donated proceeds from the day's sales to various funds to support the residential school survivors. So I want to let the member know that Minister Helwer and myself have been actively engaging with MKO. We've had conversations with every group, and lately we've been meeting with, we've met with MKO, Treaty Relations, we've met with SCO, with the Sioux Valley, we've met with survivors and knowledge keepers at Waysay Healing Center to get their perspective. We did have a meeting with MKO and AMC set up, however, it had to be rebooked, but we continue to engage with all Indigenous leadership with this. It appears that in Manitoba, legislation would need to change for this. So with our ongoing engagement, this is not an easy process, and it's important to make sure we commemorate, memorialize, and have the day as an education day. We are focused on this, and we are focused on getting it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and a friendly reminder to all participating that we must refer to ministers by their portfolio or constituency, or other members by their portfolio, or I guess members don't have a portfolio, by their constituency, not their last name. The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely agree. Manitoba legislation has to change, and that's exactly why I brought forth Bill 200 to be able to change that legislation and make that a statutory holiday. And it's a little disheartening that the Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations still refers Indigenous issue here in Manitoba to the federal government. And it's a very kind of convenient toss back and forth to be able to say that, well, those are federal issues and the feds will do this, federal government will do that for Indigenous communities and Indigenous leadership. But at the same time, there is a provincial responsibility and a provincial duty to be able to carry that forth also. And in terms of the legislation and the minister himself, just in the description of the complexities, just made it all that much more confusing as to why this legislation, Orange Shirt Day statutory holiday, needs to in fact be in place here. So there is no confusion. So it can be a recognized day, not just from the federal perspective, but also from the provincial perspective. And the minister had talked about speaking to leadership communities, and I failed to see how any member of leadership communities that the minister has talked to, I highly doubt any person in that whole realm of discussions ever said, do not make Orange Shirt Day statutory holiday. So I'm sure the minister is hearing time and time again in those discussions the need to in fact make this a statutory holiday here in the province, not just from the federal perspective. So I think I want to just be very blunt with my question. Does the minister support Orange Shirt Day being a statutory holiday here in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you. So it certainly was not my intent to imply that recognition of Orange Shirt Day or September 30th is a federal responsibility. The issues and concerns were brought up by leadership and communities during our discussions over how to best commemorate this day and recognize the importance of the day here in Manitoba. The concerns were raised over noting the day as a statutory holiday, and I think I've talked to the member opposite about this before. Statutory holidays traditionally in Manitoba have implied that this is a day off. And that's certainly not what we want to happen here. We want it to be a day to memorialize, a day to commemorate, a day to educate Manitobans on what Orange Shirt Day means and what September 30th means. So with that, there were issues around brought up by leadership, issues around their concerns about what should remain open, what should stay closed. And the Indigenous leadership has invited further conversation on these matters, which we have agreed to. So with that, last year, the government of Manitoba provided a total of $294,000 to groups and organizations such as Anish Corporation, Waysay Healing Center, Keewatin Tribal Council, which I attended their ceremony last year, and for the member opposites information, the chiefs and I that were at the event were concerned because a lot of effort was put into this event, and we noticed that there were not very many non-Indigenous individuals who attended the event. So when I reached out to individuals following the event to ask individuals from the community that I knew as to why they never attended, they were of the belief that this was a sacred day just for Indigenous people, and they didn't feel that they would have been welcomed, which is the exact opposite of the intent of September 30th. So other areas that we helped with funding were the Southeast Resource Development Council, Fox Lake, Amamaway, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, and the Manitoba Museum. And I look forward to working more collaboratively again with our Grand Chiefs and our First Nation leaders on the plans to recognize the importance of this day again here in Manitoba and work together in, like I said, getting the legislation right when we do bring it in. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, the Minister has just proven the point as to why this needs to be made a statutory holiday, so these kind of discussions can happen in a meaningful way, and there's no confusion. And perhaps I would beg one of the reasons why the only, in the Minister's words, really the majority of people that attended events were in fact only Indigenous people is not a matter of people felt they couldn't necessarily attend. There was also a lot of confusion and miseducation as to why they could attend. And also the fact of the matter is there are people that perhaps couldn't attend because they had to go to work because this in fact wasn't a statutory holiday. In December, the Premier stated that our government will consult with business and Indigenous leaders before deciding whether in fact Orange Shirt Day becomes a provincial statutory holiday. And last October in estimates, the Minister claimed that they had started engagement, quote, a while ago. Can the Minister explain when these consultations began and when he expects this consultation will be completed on this matter?
The Honourable Minister.
So, with respect to when did consultations begin, I believe that, following the introduction of Bill C-5, conversations were started. With myself, it wasn't until after my appointment in July that I was actively involved in informal discussions and the more formal discussions around how to best commemorate September 30th for me started late in the last fiscal portion of the year and early on this year, and more formally the active engagements, the meetings we've actually been having have been over the last month or two. These are the meetings either through Zoom or in person meetings. Prior to that, a lot of them were by phone call as to how should we proceed, what do you see as the importance of the day, who should be involved in the discussions. So one thing that I will say is that the labor groups were very strongly in favor and very supportive of having an official recognition of September 30th. And it fell back on us in our discussions, as I had said, that there were other issues that were brought forward that we thought we needed to spend a little more time to get it right before we bring it in. With respect to the day, I will leave it up to the member from Brandon West to provide more clarity and detail with respect to the date and the legislation.
The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
Okay, it's rather unfortunate that the minister responsible is referring me to another member who's in fact not a minister in the House to be able to go and seek information from. But I will point out that in fact that the minister is in every response so far on the issue of Orange Shirt Day statutory holiday and making it such has actually proven the point as to why it's necessary and why it's necessary today, not to wait and not to wait perhaps to use it as a campaign issue later down the line. But I'll move on maybe to another line of question here. In April, the Auditor General, the AG, released a scathing, and I will use the word scathing report into this government's lack of action on its legislative responsibilities towards reconciliation. The AG found that in the 5 years since the Path to Reconciliation Act was passed, no reconciliation strategy was developed, even though it was mandated by law. Can the minister explain why they haven't developed a strategy so far, as it's required by law?
The Honourable Minister.
I want to start by addressing a comment made by a member opposite, that the member from Brandon West is not a minister unless he knows something that I don't know. He is a minister in our government. So just to clarify that point on the record for the member. I also want to state that The member opposite knows that reconciliation is the responsibility of all Manitobans. I've said this over and over in the House again. And as a government, we could have told everyone what the reconciliation strategy would be. However, this would have been a unilateral approach and not consistent with the spirit of reconciliation. The OAG report itself states the strategy needs to foster the involvement of all sectors of society in the reconciliation process. So in doing so, we are actioning recommendations of the OAG report, section 2. And I look forward to continuing our work with all Manitobans, First Nations, the Inuit, the Métis, and members opposite to develop a Made in Manitoba reconciliation strategy. I would like to thank the Office of the Auditor General for its review of Manitoba's implementation of the Path to Reconciliation Act. The recommendations offer an opportunity to renew our focus on working with Indigenous leadership, communities, residential school survivors, elders, and knowledge keepers, and all Manitobans as we seek to advance truth and reconciliation. I think it's important for the member opposite to realize or to acknowledge that the Auditor General's report is a picture of a specific point in time, and that many of the items that were noted in the Auditor General's report were already actioned by the previous minister. And I also want to acknowledge that our Premier has given us specific direction in actioning these items and moving them forward. In the coming days and weeks, I said we would examine the Auditor General's report in depth, and I look forward to continuing to work with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leadership and communities across the province. So when we're taking the steps to work in collaboration with Indigenous leadership and communities to ensure that we are being guided by the priorities of Indigenous peoples across the province. And we want to hear the public's perspective as well on how best to advance truth and reconciliation. And we will continue to meet with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit representatives to confirm the timing and approach of this. Alongside these conversations, we will continue our efforts to advance reconciliation using the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the calls to justice of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as our guide. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to the member from Brandon West for oversighting that error earlier on. But the point of that comment was that, in fact, the lead minister on his file should have, in fact, had these answers in front of him. And the minister alluded to kind of the AG report being almost like a snapshot in time, like it was a matter of a day or a week or a month. It was actually over a 5-year period to develop this strategy. So it's not like it was just something that just happened yesterday, or was overlooked over the course of the last month or so, or even the last year for that matter. It was in fact done over the 5 years, or not done over the 5 years, I should say. So the minister talked about having these discussions in place and development of the strategy that's developed over a period of time and a period of discussions. But can the minister provide us with a timeline for when that strategy will be developed, implemented, and in fact shared with all of us?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you. So, as I said, the member opposite needs to understand that the AG as presented is dated, and it's a historical review of a point in time. And now that is not to say it's not important. It is to show us where we were at a specific point in time. And having said that, I think it's also important to note that many important areas glossed over in the report were already actioned even before the ink was dry on the report. And second, I would like the member opposite to acknowledge that reconciliation cannot be summed up as a box to be checked off. Reconciliation is an ongoing process of establishing and maintaining mutually respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Manitoba in order to do a number of things: build trust, to affirm historical agreements, to address healing, and to create a more equitable and inclusive society. So with that, I'd just like to put on the record that with respect to the recommendations, with respect to recommendation 3, we recommended that the Civil Service Commission work with the department to use the learnings from recommendation 2 to develop a mandatory course on how to show regard for the 4 principles of reconciliation. With respect to recommendation 4, we recommended that the Civil Service Commission make training on the history of Indigenous peoples, the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous and Aboriginal Crown relations, mandatory for all public servants. And I'd also like to put on the record that once I was made Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations for the province, we did hold a blanket ceremony for MLAs, where all MLAs in the government were invited to attend, to learn the blanket ceremony and the impacts of colonialism in Manitoba. I would like to put on the record that this was very, very well attended by members from our side of the House. And unfortunately, no matter how many invites we sent out, we were unable to get a buy-in from any members from the opposite side, which was fairly disappointing for me. We have also been in contact as a government with the Circles of Healing group. I also attended a one-day event with many civil servants on the spirit and intent of treaties in Manitoba. So a lot has been going on even before we saw this report.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And initially, I do have to comment that is very disrespectful of the Minister to call out why members opposite, or in particular Indigenous members opposite, did not want to attend, or the reason, or having to explain the reasons why we didn't want to attend the ceremony put on by the Minister. That is absolutely disrespectful and very disgusting of the Minister to put that, and to in fact make a point of putting that on the record, which is very shameful to be able to do that, and do that in terms of trying to make even just the ceremony itself partisan in that way. And that's just shameful to do that. And we would not do that. While the invite would, if for myself, for example, if we were involved in ceremony and that invitation went out and the Minister or members opposite choose to decline, then that's their prerogative to be able to do that and not be able to be called out or attempted in shaming that ability. As Indigenous people, culture and ceremony is very important. and it's very important to the individual. It can't be painted on just, here's a ceremony. And it's interesting, the minister talked about checking a box, which in fact, that's almost what he seemed like he was doing there by checking a box, saying, I held a ceremony and you didn't attend, shame on you. That's shameful on the minister to be able to bring forth that in that way and to be able to call that out in that way. As an Indigenous person myself, the reasons why I may or may not attend ceremony are entirely mine, and entirely me and my family and my communities, and it's nobody else's concern or place to judge why I may or may not attend. So that is just shameful on the behalf of that minister to bring it forth in that way, and to actually make a point of putting that on the record to be able to say that. So I will get into my question. In last year's estimates, the minister claimed that his department was developing a First Nations consultation policy. Can the minister tell us if this policy was developed and what it is?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under Section 35 of the Constitution Act, the government has a legal obligation to consult with Indigenous communities whenever a government decision or action may infringe upon or adversely affect the exercise of Aboriginal or treaty rights. The 2009 interim provincial policy guides Crown Indigenous consultation in Manitoba. The interim policy requires an update to reflect recent court cases and provide clear direction for government staff and clarify the role of proponents to engage with Indigenous communities and participate in consultation. So between 2017 and 2018, IRNR engaged with Indigenous organizations as well as proponents and industry representatives to guide the development of the first draft of the framework. Government departments, including Manitoba Justice, reviewed the draft and provided feedback. IRNR also made further amendments to the framework based on external legal review. And under Manitoba's 100-day action plan of 2019, IRNR conducted further engagements on the draft framework, with specific Indigenous communities and key proponents. Some of the feedback received was included in the most recent draft of the framework. And I want to say that in March of 2022, this year, I sent a letter to the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and to each of the 63 First Nations, accompanied by the most recent draft of the framework, inviting feedback on the framework and proposals from First Nations to work together on a renewed approach to the Crown's duty to consult. The department is working to incorporate feedback, and we invite further discussions prior to finalizing the policy.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the Minister provide us with the list of the key proponents he's speaking of, as well as the Indigenous communities and stakeholders that were involved in this process?
The Honourable Minister.
We can provide a copy of the letter that was sent out, and to reassure the member that it was sent to all 63 First Nations.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
So I'm a little unclear then. What is the date that the Minister expects to have this this consultation policy finalized?
The time being 5 p.m., I am interrupting the proceedings. The Committee of Supply will resume sitting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Call in the Speaker. Committee rise, call in the Speaker.
No, not committee.
No, committee don't rise. We're recessed. Nobody rise.
Recess.
The time being 5 p.m., I'm interrupting proceedings. The Committee of Supply will resume sitting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Call in the Speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is... Oh, we have to wait for staff to leave. My apologies. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is recessed and stands recessed until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Have a nice evening, everybody.